The very first question I would like to pose when you look at this painting is, what do you see? Can somebody get started? What do you think you see in here?
I see a storm, as well as I see the sea and a storm, and possibly um, a hint of landscape as well. But it also feels like there's some abstraction here, that maybe there is other forms, but I definitely feel as if I were in the middle of a sea during a storm.
Nice. Can anybody add anything to this?
When I first initially saw it, I thought it was kind of an abstraction of a plant or something natural, because I see leaves and petals, but now that the person previous to me mentioned a landscape, I definitely do see that as well, the ocean and clouds above.
And maybe another perspective?
I also initially noticed a seascape with storms, and the center figure that's kind of triangular looks a bit to me like a mountain, but it also wouldn't fit in with what the rest of the image looks like to me. So I'm wondering if that means anything.
Now, how does it make you feel? What kind of mood does this painting create for you?
I get a sense of uh, I get a sense of importance, as well as I feel like there is some tension. It's interesting because it has hints of being calm, but also almost aggressive in some ways. So I feel like there is definitely a stronger personality that this painting has.
Is this a happy storm, an ominous storm?
I definitely feel that it's more ominous. I don't know, maybe it's just the colors. It kind of reminds me of like the end of a day, or the light you see before a storm. I don't really see it as happy. It's more so like I feel more worried looking at it.
And what about another perspective, perhaps? What about the mood?
To me, this has a really charged atmosphere. It's very turbulent, especially if you think about being at sea during a storm. There's no solid ground anywhere around you. The ship you're on is swaying with the waves and the wind, and the waves and the sky are moving an awful lot as well.
That's a very interesting observation, that you are there at sea in a small ship, perhaps. Could somebody add something to that, or do you see something different?
Now that I have been looking at it longer, I almost feel like the center form, that is almost like a skin tone, or one would say like a beach tone, could also be a figure. And it's interesting because it almost feels like, if you're looking at it, the figure is almost crouching and huddling, and then there's all of this turmoil and things working up all around it. So the painting could also possibly work as some kind of figurative work.
Huh, fascinating. Would anyone have to say something different regarding this or add to that?
When she mentions that, and the figure, you see the three central like shapes, it does look like someone is hiding, like it could be a person like sheltering. And I go back to my original observation, which was like natural plant life, and it looks like this person is hiding in like leaves and a forest to me.
Very interesting. I would just like to ask one more question. Do you think there is a sense of hope in here, or primarily anxiety and fear when you look at this composition, whether it's a human being or foliage, forest or sea? How does it feel in general?
I would definitely say it is definitely not very hopeful. Anxious is a fabulous word for it because there's just tones in this that can be so aggressive, and um, I feel like it's definitely striking that mood.
And perhaps maybe somebody could venture to guess, when was this painted? What do you think? Where would you place it?
I mean, I'm not completely sure, but I would say like the beginning of the 20th century, like early modernism, just because of the geometric shapes, flatness, abstraction.
Very good guess. Very good guess. Anybody else to add to this?
I would say perhaps a couple decades into the 20th century, as abstraction was taking more of a prominent role within art.
Okay. And do you think this was painted in Europe or in the United States? Just a wild guess.
I say the United States. Because I feel like there's a lot of in a lot of more abstract works that I've seen from American artists, I feel like there's a lot more cooler and darker tones than I've seen from some European painters.
Nice guess. What about any influence, or does it remind you of anybody from history of art from that time period?
It reminds me of how expressionists would use blue tones when they were conveying intellectual ideas as the meanings of their works, because there's a lot of blues and greens, which of course, if they are depicting the sea, would already be present. But I think the fact that this blue-green and this orangey peachy color are kind of the only two colors in the work heightens that more.
Nice, nice. Now, I just want to tell you a couple of things regarding the background of this composition. The title is Golden Storm, and it actually was painted by Arthur Dove, one of the American pioneering abstract painters. It was actually painted from his boat in Huntington Harbor, Long Island, and it represents one of the earliest paintings by Dove to enter the Phillips collection. Dove would be supported by Duncan Phillips for years. He would even be given a stipend so he would continue to paint and give paintings to the Phillips collection. And of course, this particular painting was much admired by the founder of the museum. Duncan Phillips called it, quote, a symphonic tone poem on Earth-shape's world in the maelstrom. He also added something else regarding Dove. When there is a hint of great things going on in the mind of the artist and of his consciousness of the rhythm of the universe, abstract art ceases to be an amusement for the aesthete and becomes a divine activity. So what Duncan Phillips was saying here was that there was a transcendental quality, or we could call it spiritual quality, to Dove's abstraction. But you are absolutely right about so many things within this picture. The painting was painted in 1925 and it was acquired in 1926. So now that I have read this to you about the painting, how do you feel about the things you said, and what else might you want to add?
I like how you had mentioned how Duncan Phillips had mentioned that he said that there was some kind of spiritual transformation that these paintings happen to have. And especially with this one, I was trying to really put that into words while looking at it. There is just that like spiritual overall presence of this painting that you like really get pulled into and you feel it from just the colors and the shapes alone, and the tones. I would say that that was really nice to hear, that I am seeing also what others have seen.
Very nice. What about some other voices?
It definitely reminded me that sometimes it takes longer. You need to look at a painting longer to see everything, because my initial observation was not exactly what, like Alyssa had said, which was spot on. Being on a ship, the perspective of being on a boat, I definitely see that now, and I think he did a really good job of capturing that in this painting. All of everything you described, the emotions and spirituality is very spot on.
Yes. Anything else you might want to add about this spirituality in art? Who were some of the other artists at the time period that come to mind that maybe relate to this notion of painting or the spiritual in art?
To me, when I think of spirituality and abstract art, and probably for most people, the most prominent artist is Mark Rothko. And this work does remind me of him, with the way they just are blending colors and allowing the colors to speak for themselves. But there also is some more forms in this work, clearly, compared to what he's most known for.
That's a very nice connection, in fact, because we know that the Phillips also admired Mark Rothko, and we have the first Rothko room at the Phillips collection, which was designed by the artist himself. That's a very nice connection. Any other points that you might want to make? Any one of you?
I just appreciate how, despite the fact that this is set in the middle of open water, how he manages to still enclose the viewer within the scene by having these large looming figures surround all four sides of the canvas.
Very nice. Thank you for that. Okay, I just want to add something else, which I didn't tell you before. This is not a big painting. The actual size of this painting is only 18 by 20 inches. How do we think about it after we know that?
Sorry. I think that it's interesting because in the format that we're looking at it right now, it's a little smaller than what you're describing, well, a little more smaller, but it definitely has a presence of a very big painting. So I find that to be kind of surprising, but also not surprising because the story you tell about how this painting was actually painted on a boat, and what is the logistics of taking a giant canvas out to sea and trying to paint. Like, that's not logical. Could be done, but it definitely adds to more of a personal value and more closer to just like a single human interaction with the painting itself.
Very nice point. Scale is important, as we know in art. And knowing that this kind of image full of energy, this kind of spiritual charge, chromatic charge, is actually on a small scale, does surprise us. But that maybe even enhances my admiration for the artist, that he did not need big scale in order to convey something powerful.